Question 1. Regulatory review indicates that Toyota's strategic planning process must consider the diverse interests of its stakeholders when evaluating significant capital expenditure proposals. Specifically, when assessing an investment in advanced, sustainable manufacturing technologies that may have a higher upfront cost but promise long-term operational efficiencies and reduced environmental impact, which stakeholder perspective should be prioritized to ensure the company's enduring success and compliance with evolving corporate governance expectations. Option A. The perspective that balances the long-term value creation for all stakeholders, including future investors, customers, employees, and the environment, by investing in sustainable innovation. Option B. The perspective of employees, prioritizing immediate wage increases and enhanced benefits without regard to the investment's strategic impact. Option C. The perspective of existing shareholders, focusing on maximizing immediate dividend payouts and short-term share price appreciation. Option D. The perspective of suppliers, focusing solely on securing the lowest possible input costs for current production. The correct answer is C. The perspective of existing shareholders, focusing on maximizing immediate dividend payouts and short-term share price appreciation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a specific stakeholder group, existing shareholders, with the long-term strategic goals and potential future value creation for the company, which also benefits other stakeholders like future investors and employees. Misjudging this balance can lead to short-sighted decisions that harm the company's sustainability and reputation. The pressure to meet short-term performance metrics can be intense, making it difficult to prioritize investments that may not yield immediate returns, but are crucial for future growth and competitive advantage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of how proposed strategic initiatives, such as investing in new sustainable manufacturing technologies, align with the company's long-term vision and mission. This approach prioritizes the creation of sustainable, long-term value for all stakeholders, not just immediate returns for current shareholders. It considers the broader impact on the company's competitive position, brand reputation, and ability to attract and retain talent. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this aligns with principles of corporate social responsibility and good governance, which increasingly expect companies to consider environmental, social, and governance-esque factors in their decision-making. This proactive stance can also mitigate future regulatory risks and enhance investor confidence in the company's resilience. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing immediate dividend payouts over strategic investments in new technologies would be an incorrect approach. This focuses solely on short-term shareholder returns, potentially starving the company of the capital needed for innovation and long-term growth. This could lead to a decline in competitiveness, making the company vulnerable to disruption and ultimately harming all stakeholders, including future shareholders. Ethically, it represents a failure to act as a responsible steward of the company's future. Focusing exclusively on cost-cutting measures without considering their impact on product quality or employee morale would also be an incorrect approach. While cost efficiency is important, aggressive cost-cutting can erode brand value, lead to operational inefficiencies, and damage employee engagement, all of which negatively impact long-term sustainability. This approach fails to consider the interconnectedness of operational decisions and their broader stakeholder implications. Ignoring the potential long-term environmental impact of current manufacturing processes in favor of maintaining existing, less sustainable methods would be another incorrect approach. This prioritizes immediate operational ease and cost over environmental stewardship and potential future regulatory liabilities or reputational damage. It neglects the growing expectation for companies to operate sustainably and can lead to significant future costs associated with remediation or adaptation to stricter environmental regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric decision-making framework. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests and concerns, and evaluating how proposed actions will affect each group. The process should involve scenario planning, risk assessment, and a thorough understanding of the company's strategic objectives and the regulatory landscape. When faced with competing interests, the decision-maker must weigh the potential for long-term value creation and sustainability against short-term gains, always considering ethical implications and regulatory compliance. A robust governance structure that encourages open discussion and diverse perspectives is crucial for making sound, long-term decisions. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern among a key supplier group regarding the company's extended payment terms, which are reportedly impacting their own cash flow and operational stability. While the company has historically benefited from these terms, the feedback suggests a potential strain on the supplier relationship and a risk to the continuity of supply for critical components. What is the most appropriate initial response to this stakeholder feedback? Option A. Acknowledge the feedback in a general communication to all suppliers, stating that the company is committed to fair practices, but will maintain its current payment terms due to internal financial considerations. Option B. Delegate the issue to the procurement department to handle directly with the suppliers, without further internal discussion or strategic consideration of the broader implications. Option C. Immediately implement a slight reduction in payment terms across all supplier contracts to demonstrate responsiveness, without a detailed analysis of the specific impact on each supplier group. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the current payment terms, engaging with the affected supplier group and relevant internal departments e.g. procurement, finance, to understand the impact and explore mutually agreeable solutions. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the current payment terms, engaging with the affected supplier group and relevant internal departments, e.g., procurement, finance, to understand the impact and explore mutually agreeable solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in professional environments where differing stakeholder priorities can create conflict. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the immediate financial pressures of the company with the long-term reputational and operational risks associated with a particular business practice. Careful judgment is required to identify the most sustainable and ethically sound path forward, rather than opting for a quick fix that could have detrimental consequences. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven investigation into the root causes of the identified issue. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate transparency, accountability, and a commitment to addressing systemic problems. By engaging with relevant departments and seeking to understand the underlying reasons for the stakeholders' concerns, the company demonstrates a proactive and responsible attitude. This approach is also consistent with regulatory expectations that companies operate with integrity and manage risks effectively. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without addressing the underlying issue fails to meet ethical obligations and could lead to regulatory noncompliance. For instance, if the stakeholder feedback relates to environmental concerns, ignoring the root cause and simply cutting costs in that area could violate environmental protection laws and lead to significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves dismissing the feedback without proper investigation demonstrates a lack of respect for stakeholders and a failure to uphold principles of good corporate citizenship. This can erode trust and lead to further escalation of issues, potentially attracting regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach that involves a superficial review without deep analysis risks perpetuating the problem, leading to recurring issues and a perception of corporate indifference, which can have long-term negative impacts on brand value and investor confidence. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging and validating stakeholder concerns. This should be followed by a structured process of information gathering, root cause analysis, and risk assessment. The decision-making process should involve cross-functional collaboration, consideration of all relevant regulations and ethical guidelines, and a focus on long-term sustainability and stakeholder value. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, less expensive background check system for all potential hires would save the company a significant amount of money annually. However, this new system has a slightly higher rate of false positives and may not capture certain types of past misconduct as effectively as the current, more robust system. The company is operating under the general guidelines of fair employment practices and is committed to maintaining a safe and productive work environment. Which of the following approaches best reflects sound professional judgment in this situation? Option A. Implement the new system but conduct additional ad hoc checks on candidates flagged by the new system, creating a hybrid approach that balances cost and risk. Option B. Maintain the current, more robust background check system, prioritizing the mitigation of potential risks and ensuring a higher degree of due diligence, even if it incurs higher costs. Option C. Immediately switch to the new system and address any issues that arise on a case-by-case basis to minimize upfront investment and operational disruption. Option D. Adopt the new, less expensive background check system, as the cost savings are substantial and the risk of a significant negative incident is statistically low. The correct answer is D. Adopt the new, less expensive background check system, as the cost savings are substantial and the risk of a significant negative incident is statistically low. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate cost savings against potential long-term reputational damage and regulatory noncompliance. The decision-maker must consider not only the financial implications, but also the ethical responsibilities and the impact on stakeholder trust. The Toyota Hiring Assessment Test, like many professional assessments, aims to evaluate a candidate's ability to make sound judgments in complex situations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established ethical guidelines and regulatory frameworks over short-term financial gains. In the context of a hiring assessment, demonstrating an understanding of these principles is crucial. This approach aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and integrity, which are fundamental to responsible business operations and are often implicitly or explicitly tested in such assessments. It also reflects a commitment to due diligence and risk management, ensuring that decisions are made with a comprehensive understanding of potential consequences. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost saving, without considering the potential for future legal repercussions or reputational harm, demonstrates a lack of foresight and an insufficient understanding of risk management. This could lead to regulatory penalties, loss of public trust, and ultimately, greater financial costs than the initial savings. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal bias, rather than objective data and established procedures, fails to uphold professional standards of objectivity and fairness. This can result in discriminatory practices and undermine the credibility of the hiring process. A third incorrect approach that ignores the potential impact on employee morale and the company's employer brand overlooks the broader consequences of a decision, which can affect recruitment and retention in the long run. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that involves identifying the problem, gathering relevant information, including regulatory requirements and ethical considerations, evaluating alternative solutions based on their potential impact, both positive and negative, selecting the best course of action, and then implementing and reviewing the decision. This systematic approach ensures that all critical factors are considered, leading to more robust and defensible outcomes. Question 4. Implementation of a new automated inventory management system at a Toyota manufacturing plant is being considered to improve efficiency and reduce operational costs. The project team has presented a proposal highlighting the potential for faster stock turnover and reduced manual error. However, concerns have been raised internally regarding the system's potential impact on existing job roles, data security protocols, and the compatibility with current quality control procedures. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential challenges and ensures responsible implementation? Option A. Delegate the responsibility for assessing potential impacts to individual department heads, allowing them to report any significant concerns to senior management without a unified, overarching assessment framework. Option B. Proceed with a phased rollout of the system, relying on the IT department's assurance of data security and the operations team's experience to manage any unforeseen issues as they arise. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the system's effects on employees, data integrity, operational workflows, and regulatory compliance, developing mitigation strategies for identified risks before proceeding with full implementation. Option D. Prioritize the cost savings and efficiency gains outlined in the proposal, implementing the system immediately and addressing any employee concerns or operational disruptions on an ad hoc basis. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the system's effects on employees, data integrity, operational workflows, and regulatory compliance, developing mitigation strategies for identified risks before proceeding with full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of a significant change. The introduction of a new automated system, while promising benefits, carries inherent risks that must be thoroughly assessed before full implementation. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating potential negative impacts on employees, data integrity, and compliance with relevant regulations, all within the context of a competitive automotive market where efficiency is paramount. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of innovation does not inadvertently lead to regulatory breaches or ethical shortcomings. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and systematic impact assessment. This involves proactively identifying potential risks and benefits across various domains, including operational, financial, human resources, and regulatory compliance. By engaging stakeholders, gathering data, and developing mitigation strategies, this approach ensures that the implementation is not only technically sound, but also ethically responsible and legally compliant. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are essential for sustainable business operations and maintaining stakeholder trust. Specifically, within the framework of a company like Toyota, which operates globally and adheres to stringent quality and safety standards, a thorough impact assessment is crucial for upholding its reputation and ensuring adherence to diverse regulatory landscapes. An incorrect approach that bypasses a formal impact assessment, focusing solely on the perceived immediate benefits of cost reduction and efficiency gains, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This oversight could lead to unforeseen consequences such as data breaches, system failures that compromise product quality, or adverse employee reactions that disrupt operations. From a regulatory standpoint, failing to assess the impact on data privacy or security could violate data protection laws. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the well-being of employees and the potential negative consequences for customers and the wider community. Another incorrect approach, which relies on anecdotal evidence or the experience of a few individuals without a structured assessment, is equally flawed. This lacks the rigor necessary to identify all potential risks and may overlook critical compliance requirements or systemic issues, leading to potential legal liabilities and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with defining the scope of the change, identifying all potential stakeholders and their interests, and then systematically identifying potential risks and benefits. For each identified risk, an evaluation of its likelihood and potential impact should be conducted. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and implemented. This process should be iterative, with regular reviews and updates as the implementation progresses. Transparency and communication with all stakeholders throughout the process are also critical for building trust and ensuring a smoother transition. Question 5. What factors determine the comprehensiveness of a risk assessment for a critical automotive component supply chain operating across multiple international jurisdictions? Option A. The absence of any reported disruptions in the supply chain over the past 5 years and the ease of switching to alternative suppliers. Option B. The immediate cost-effectiveness of current supplier contracts and the historical performance data of those suppliers. Option C. The company's direct operational control over each supplier's manufacturing processes and the current market price of the components. Option D. The geopolitical stability of supplier regions, the financial health and operational resilience of key suppliers, the potential for natural disasters or pandemics affecting logistics, and the regulatory environment in each supplier's jurisdiction. The correct answer is D. The geopolitical stability of supplier regions, the financial health and operational resilience of key suppliers, the potential for natural disasters or pandemics affecting logistics, and the regulatory environment in each supplier's jurisdiction. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in risk assessment by requiring a proactive identification of potential operational disruptions within a global automotive manufacturing context, specifically concerning a critical component supply chain. The complexity arises from the interconnectedness of international suppliers, varying geopolitical landscapes, and the inherent unpredictability of global events. A failure to adequately assess these risks can lead to significant production delays, financial losses, and reputational damage. Professional judgment is crucial in balancing the cost of mitigation with the potential impact of identified risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted risk assessment that considers both the likelihood and impact of various disruptive events on the critical component supply chain. This includes analyzing geopolitical stability in supplier regions, assessing the financial health and operational resilience of key suppliers, evaluating the potential for natural disasters or pandemics affecting production or logistics, and understanding the regulatory environment in each supplier's jurisdiction. This approach aligns with best professional practices in supply chain risk management, emphasizing foresight and preparedness. It reflects a commitment to operational continuity and stakeholder protection, which are implicit expectations in a regulated industry like automotive manufacturing, even without specific explicit regulations for this exact scenario. Ethical considerations also play a role, as a robust risk assessment helps ensure the company can meet its commitments to customers and employees. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on the immediate cost-effectiveness of the current supplier relationship without considering potential future disruptions, is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach neglects the principle of due diligence in supply chain management, which requires anticipating and mitigating foreseeable risks, prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term operational stability and resilience, potentially exposing the company to significant unforeseen costs and liabilities. Relying exclusively on historical performance data without incorporating forward-looking risk factors is another failure. While historical data is valuable, it does not account for evolving geopolitical tensions, emerging environmental threats, or changes in supplier capabilities. This narrow perspective can lead to a false sense of security and an underestimation of potential risks. Ignoring potential disruptions due to a lack of direct control over supplier operations is a significant oversight. Professional risk assessment mandates considering the entire value chain, even elements outside direct operational control. A failure to do so demonstrates a lack of comprehensive risk identification and mitigation planning, which could have severe consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and forward-looking approach to risk assessment. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the assessment. Clearly identify the critical assets, processes, or supply chains to be evaluated. 2. Identifying potential risks. Brainstorm and research a wide range of internal and external threats, considering their likelihood and potential impact. 3. Analyzing and evaluating risks. Quantify or qualitatively assess the severity of each identified risk. 4. Developing mitigation strategies. Plan actions to reduce the likelihood or impact of high-priority risks. 5. Monitoring and reviewing. Regularly update the risk assessment as circumstances change. This structured process ensures that all relevant factors are considered, leading to more robust and effective risk management strategies. Question 6. The assessment process reveals a candidate's understanding of how to handle customer feedback collected during a recent service appointment. The feedback indicates a potential issue with a specific vehicle model that, if widespread, could pose a safety concern. The candidate is aware that reporting this feedback internally could trigger a costly recall process, impacting quarterly sales targets. Which of the following actions best demonstrates professional responsibility and ethical conduct in this situation? Option A. Keep the feedback confidential and wait to see if more customers report similar problems before considering any action, to avoid unnecessary disruption. Option B. Immediately escalate the feedback through the appropriate internal channels, providing all relevant details, to initiate a thorough investigation into the potential safety issue, regardless of the impact on sales targets. Option C. Downplay the feedback and focus only on positive comments in the report to avoid alarming management and jeopardizing sales targets. Option D. Share the feedback anonymously with a competitor to gauge their experience with similar issues, hoping they might bear the brunt of any necessary action. The correct answer is B. Immediately escalate the feedback through the appropriate internal channels, providing all relevant details, to initiate a thorough investigation into the potential safety issue, regardless of the impact on sales targets. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a candidate's understanding of ethical conduct and professional responsibility within the automotive industry, specifically concerning customer data privacy. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing business objectives with legal and ethical obligations. Mismanaging customer data can lead to severe reputational damage, financial penalties, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with regulatory frameworks and ethical principles. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to data protection laws and ethical guidelines. This involves obtaining explicit consent for data usage, clearly communicating how data will be used, and providing mechanisms for customers to opt out or request data deletion. This aligns with the principles of transparency, accountability, and respect for individual privacy, which are fundamental to building and maintaining customer relationships and complying with relevant regulations such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the assessment were in a jurisdiction that follows it, or similar national data protection laws. An incorrect approach that involves using customer data for marketing without explicit consent is a direct violation of data privacy regulations. This failure stems from a disregard for customer autonomy and a lack of understanding of the legal requirements for data processing. It can lead to significant fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach, which is to share customer data with third parties without informing the customer or obtaining their consent, constitutes a breach of trust and a violation of data protection laws. This demonstrates a lack of ethical consideration and a failure to uphold professional standards of data stewardship. A third incorrect approach, which is to store customer data insecurely, exposes the company and its customers to risks of data breaches, leading to potential identity theft and financial fraud. This represents a failure in due diligence and a disregard for the security obligations owed to customers. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the relevant legal and ethical obligations. This involves consulting company policies, industry best practices, and applicable regulations. Next, they should assess the potential risks and benefits of each course of action, considering the impact on customers, the company, and stakeholders. Finally, they should choose the option that best upholds ethical principles and legal compliance, prioritizing customer trust and data security. Question 7. Investigation of a situation where a direct manager asks an employee to quickly provide a client list containing personal contact information to a third-party vendor for an urgent marketing campaign, without following the standard procedure of obtaining client consent for such sharing. The employee is aware that the company's data privacy policy explicitly requires explicit client consent before sharing personal data with external parties. Option A. Politely inform the manager that sharing the client list without obtaining prior client consent would violate company data privacy policy and propose to work with the manager to develop a compliant method for obtaining consent or using anonymized data for the campaign. Option B. Forward the request to the company's legal department without informing the manager, seeking their guidance on how to proceed. Option C. Express concern to the manager about the policy violation, but proceed with sharing the data to avoid potential negative repercussions for not complying with the manager's direct instruction. Option D. Immediately provide the manager with the client list as requested, assuming the manager is aware of any necessary approvals or exceptions. The correct answer is A. Politely inform the manager that sharing the client list without obtaining prior client consent would violate company data privacy policy, and propose to work with the manager to develop a compliant method for obtaining consent or using anonymized data for the campaign. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between a direct request from a superior and the employee's ethical obligation to adhere to company policy and potentially regulatory guidelines regarding data handling. The employee is placed in a position where fulfilling the request could lead to a breach of confidentiality or data integrity, while refusing could strain their relationship with their manager and potentially impact their career progression. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing loyalty to the company and management with the imperative to act ethically and compliantly. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to established company policies and data protection principles. By seeking clarification and proposing an alternative, compliant method, the employee demonstrates integrity, a commitment to data security, and a proactive problem-solving attitude. This aligns with the ethical duty to act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, which includes protecting sensitive information. It also reflects a responsible approach to managing information, ensuring that any data sharing is done through approved and secure channels, thereby mitigating risks of unauthorized access or misuse. An incorrect approach that involves directly sharing the requested data without verification or adherence to policy represents a failure to uphold data protection standards. This could lead to regulatory penalties if the data is sensitive and its disclosure violates privacy laws or industry-specific regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to bypass established controls, potentially exposing the company to significant risks. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the request or refusing outright without offering a solution, might be perceived as insubordinate or uncooperative. While it avoids the immediate ethical breach of sharing data improperly, it fails to address the underlying business need and could damage professional relationships. A more constructive approach would involve open communication and a collaborative effort to find a compliant solution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and relevant regulations. When faced with a request that seems to conflict with these, the professional should 1. Pause and assess the request against established guidelines. 2. Seek clarification from the requester to understand the business need and intent. 3. If a conflict is identified, clearly and respectfully communicate the policy or regulatory concern. 4. Propose alternative compliance solutions that meet the business need. 5. If necessary, escalate the issue to a supervisor or compliance department for guidance. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and in line with organizational and legal requirements. Question 8. What factors determine the most appropriate response when answering questions within the Toyota hiring assessment test, considering the need to demonstrate relevant skills and knowledge according to the test's design? Option A. Relying on general industry knowledge and past experiences to infer the intended meaning of questions, even if it deviates from the literal text. Option B. Strict adherence to the specific wording and context of each question, along with a thorough understanding of the assessment's objectives and scoring criteria as defined by Toyota. Option C. Focusing on answering questions in a way that highlights personal strengths and experiences, regardless of whether they directly address the question's specific requirements. Option D. Prioritizing speed of completion and selecting the most plausible answer quickly, without detailed analysis of each option. The correct answer is B. Strict adherence to the specific wording and context of each question, along with a thorough understanding of the assessment's objectives and scoring criteria as defined by Toyota. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business objective, streamlining a process to improve efficiency, and the imperative of regulatory compliance. The pressure to deliver results quickly can tempt individuals to overlook or minimize the importance of adhering to established procedures, especially if those procedures seem cumbersome. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational effectiveness with the non-negotiable requirement to uphold legal and ethical standards, particularly in a regulated industry like automotive manufacturing, where safety and consumer protection are paramount. A misstep in regulatory compliance can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and, most importantly, potential harm to consumers. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework, specifically the Toyota hiring assessment test's stipulated guidelines. This involves meticulously reviewing the assessment's objectives, the types of questions posed, and the scoring mechanisms as defined by the test's creators. It means recognizing that the assessment is designed to evaluate specific competencies and knowledge relevant to the role, and that deviating from the prescribed method of answering or interpreting questions undermines the validity of the assessment itself. Adhering to the test's structure and content ensures that the evaluation is fair, consistent, and accurately reflects the candidate's suitability for the position, thereby upholding the integrity of the hiring process and the company's commitment to fair employment practices. This aligns with general principles of good governance and ethical conduct in recruitment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves focusing solely on the perceived intent of the question without strictly adhering to the provided context or answer choices. This can lead to misinterpretations and answers that, while potentially logical in a broader sense, do not align with the specific criteria the assessment is designed to measure. This approach fails to respect the structured nature of standardized assessments and can result in an inaccurate reflection of the candidate's understanding of the material as defined by the test designers. Another incorrect approach is to assume that prior knowledge or experience in similar roles or assessment automatically qualifies a candidate to deviate from the explicit instructions or format of the current test. While experience is valuable, each assessment has its own unique parameters. Ignoring these specific parameters in favor of generalized assumptions can lead to answers that are off-topic or do not address the precise requirements of the question as framed within the Toyota hiring assessment tests framework. This demonstrates a lack of attention to detail and an overestimation of one's ability to bypass established evaluation protocols. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize speed and completion over accuracy and adherence to the assessment's guidelines. This might involve rushing through questions, making assumptions, or selecting answers without careful consideration of the nuances presented. Such an approach risks generating superficial or incorrect responses, failing to demonstrate the depth of understanding or the critical thinking skills that the assessment is intended to gauge. It also disrespects the investment made by Toyota in developing a robust assessment process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach any assessment, including hiring assessments, with a mindset of diligent adherence to the established rules and objectives. The decision-making process should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the purpose and scope of the assessment. 2. Carefully reading and interpreting all instructions and questions within their given context. 3. Evaluating all provided options against the specific requirements of the question and the assessment's overall framework. And 4. Selecting the answer that most accurately and completely addresses the question as intended by the assessment designers. Prioritizing accuracy and compliance over assumptions or shortcuts. Question 9. When evaluating the implementation of a new internal policy designed to enhance customer data privacy and security across all Toyota departments, which of the following strategies best ensures effective adoption and compliance while minimizing operational disruption? Option A. Distributing the new policy document via email to all employees and expecting them to read, understand, and implement its requirements independently, with no formal training or follow-up. Option B. Immediate enforcement of the new policy across all departments simultaneously, with a directive that all employees must adhere to the updated protocols without delay, and disciplinary action for any non-compliance. Option C. A phased rollout of the policy, beginning with pilot departments to gather feedback and refine training materials before a company-wide launch, supported by clear communication channels for employee queries and ongoing compliance checks. Option D. Empowering each department head to interpret and implement the policy as they see fit, allowing for significant variations in data handling practices across the organization based on departmental needs. The correct answer is C. A phased rollout of the policy, beginning with pilot departments to gather feedback and refine training materials before a company-wide launch, supported by clear communication channels for employee queries and ongoing compliance checks. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in implementing a new compliance policy within a large organization like Toyota, specifically concerning data privacy and handling of customer information. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data utilization for business insights with the stringent requirements of data protection regulations. Ensuring that all employees understand and adhere to the new policy, especially when it impacts their daily workflows, requires careful communication, training, and oversight. The risk of non-compliance, leading to potential data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage, necessitates a robust and well-executed implementation strategy. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and phased rollout. This involves thorough training tailored to different roles, clear communication of the policy's rationale and implications, and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and feedback. This aligns with the principles of proactive compliance and risk management, ensuring that employees are equipped to handle data responsibly and that the organization remains within legal boundaries. Such an approach fosters a culture of compliance and minimizes the likelihood of accidental or intentional breaches. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate enforcement without adequate training or support would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to confusion, errors, and potential violations of data privacy laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the jurisdiction were the EU or similar frameworks in other regions. Such a failure would demonstrate a disregard for employee understanding and a lack of due diligence in policy implementation, exposing the company to significant legal and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves delegating the entire responsibility for policy adherence to individual employees without clear guidelines or oversight, is also professionally flawed. This abdicates the organization's responsibility to ensure compliance and places an undue burden on employees, increasing the risk of inconsistent application and breaches. It fails to establish a unified compliance framework and can lead to a fragmented understanding of data protection obligations. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment of the policy's impact, stakeholder consultation, development of clear and actionable guidelines, a robust training program, and a system for continuous monitoring and improvement. This iterative process ensures that the implementation is effective, sustainable, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory requirements. Question 10. When evaluating the readiness of a new vehicle model for market launch and faced with data indicating a potential, albeit minor, deviation from a specific performance benchmark that could impact long-term durability, what is the most responsible course of action for a product development engineer? Option A. Suggest a minor software update that can be deployed post-launch to address the deviation, without delaying the initial production and release. Option B. Inform management of the deviation but recommend proceeding with the launch, highlighting only the positive performance data and downplaying the significance of the benchmark deviation. Option C. Proceed with the launch as scheduled, assuming the deviation is within acceptable operational tolerances and will not significantly affect customer experience or safety. Option D. Recommend delaying the launch to conduct further testing and analysis to fully understand the deviation and implement necessary improvements, even if it means missing the initial target release date. The correct answer is D. Recommend delaying the launch to conduct further testing and analysis to fully understand the deviation and implement necessary improvements, even if it means missing the initial target release date. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate conflicting priorities between immediate operational needs and long-term strategic goals, all while adhering to the principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct expected within the automotive industry, particularly concerning product development and market introduction. The pressure to meet production targets can sometimes lead to shortcuts or overlooking potential issues, which can have significant ramifications for customer safety, brand reputation, and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and objective assessment of the new vehicle's performance data against established safety and quality standards. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty to ensure product safety and compliance with all relevant regulations, such as those overseen by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA in the U.S., or equivalent bodies in other jurisdictions. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and risk management, safeguarding both consumers and the company's long-term viability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting the launch deadline without adequate validation would represent a failure to uphold due diligence. This could lead to the introduction of a vehicle with undetected defects, potentially violating consumer protection laws and specific automotive safety regulations. Ethically, it breaches the trust placed in the company by its customers and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively presenting data to management to support the launch, constitutes a serious ethical lapse and a potential violation of corporate reporting standards. This misrepresentation undermines transparency and can lead to decisions based on incomplete or misleading information, with potentially severe consequences. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. It also necessitates open and honest communication channels, where concerns can be raised and addressed without fear of reprisal. Professionals must be empowered to advocate for the highest standards of safety and quality, even when faced with commercial pressures, by referencing established company policies, industry best practices, and applicable regulatory requirements. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that a sales representative for Toyota is nearing the end of a quarter and is close to meeting a significant performance target. A potential customer expresses interest in a vehicle, but their stated financial circumstances and intended use of the vehicle raise a slight concern regarding their ability to afford ongoing costs and whether the vehicle is the most suitable option for their needs, potentially bordering on a compliance issue under the Toyota Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework. The representative is aware of the pressure to meet their target. What is the most appropriate course of action for the sales representative in this situation? Option A. Politely decline to sell the vehicle to the customer, citing vague concerns about suitability without further investigation. Option B. Pause the sales process, seek clarification and guidance from the Toyota Compliance Department regarding the customer's situation and the relevant regulations, and document the interaction. Option C. Proceed with the sale as planned, assuming the customer is making an informed decision to ensure the sales target is met. Option D. Immediately halt the sales process and inform the customer that they cannot purchase the vehicle due to potential compliance issues. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the sale as planned, assuming the customer is making an informed decision to ensure the sales target is met. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. The pressure to meet sales targets can inadvertently lead to overlooking or downplaying compliance obligations, creating a risk of misconduct. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that ethical conduct and regulatory adherence are prioritized, even when faced with commercial pressures. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a proactive commitment to regulatory compliance. By seeking clarification from the compliance department and documenting the interaction, the employee is not only ensuring their actions align with the Toyota Hiring Assessment Tests regulatory framework, but also creating an audit trail. This upholds the principle of know your customer and suitability, which are fundamental in many regulatory environments to prevent mis-selling and ensure that products or services are appropriate for the individual. This aligns with the ethical duty to act with integrity and due diligence. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the sale without seeking clarification fails to uphold the duty of care and due diligence. This could lead to a breach of regulations designed to protect individuals and maintain market integrity. It represents a failure to act with reasonable skill and care, potentially exposing both the individual and Toyota to regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the potential compliance issue to meet a target, constitutes a direct disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical principles. It prioritizes short-term commercial gain over long-term compliance and customer welfare, which is a serious ethical and regulatory failing. It can be construed as a willful breach of conduct rules. A further incorrect approach, such as attempting to interpret the regulations independently without consulting the designated compliance function, is risky and unprofessional. Regulations are often complex and subject to interpretation. Relying on personal, potentially incomplete, understanding can lead to misapplication and noncompliance, even with good intentions. This bypasses the established internal controls designed to ensure accurate regulatory interpretation and application. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear hierarchy of priorities. Regulatory compliance and ethical conduct must always precede immediate business targets. When faced with ambiguity or potential conflict, the first step should be to consult internal compliance resources. Documenting all interactions and decisions related to compliance is crucial for accountability and risk management. If internal guidance is unclear, escalating the issue to a higher authority within the compliance or legal department is the responsible course of action. Question 12. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new product launch is approaching, and the team responsible for the assessment has limited time to complete their report. They are considering several approaches to expedite the process. Which approach best aligns with professional risk management principles and regulatory expectations for a thorough assessment? Option A. Make broad assumptions about potential market reactions and operational challenges without conducting specific research or validation. Option B. Rely exclusively on historical data from similar past product launches, assuming that future risks will mirror past experiences. Option C. Focus solely on readily available internal financial reports, assuming that these will capture all significant operational and market risks. Option D. Conduct interviews with key stakeholders across different departments and consult with external industry experts to gather diverse perspectives and identify potential risks. The correct answer is D. Conduct interviews with key stakeholders across different departments and consult with external industry experts to gather diverse perspectives and identify potential risks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for timely information with the imperative to conduct a thorough and unbiased risk assessment. The pressure to deliver a report quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the assessment, potentially overlooking critical risks or overstating others. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment is both comprehensive and actionable, meeting the needs of stakeholders without sacrificing accuracy. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the systematic identification, analysis, and evaluation of potential risks. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management, which are often codified in professional standards and regulatory guidelines for financial services. By engaging with relevant internal departments and external experts, the assessment gains a broader perspective, incorporating diverse knowledge and experience. This methodical process ensures that all significant risk factors are considered, their potential impact is understood, and appropriate mitigation strategies can be developed. This thoroughness is ethically sound as it promotes informed decision-making and protects the organization and its stakeholders from unforeseen adverse events. An incorrect approach that relies solely on readily available data without further investigation fails to meet the professional standard of due diligence. This approach risks overlooking emerging threats or subtle interdependencies between risk factors, leading to an incomplete and potentially misleading assessment. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of commitment to thoroughness and could result in significant financial or reputational damage if unaddressed risks materialize. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on historical data without considering future trends or potential black swan events is also professionally deficient. Risk assessment is inherently forward-looking. Relying exclusively on the past ignores the dynamic nature of the business environment and the potential for novel risks to emerge. This can lead to a false sense of security and inadequate preparation for future challenges, violating the ethical duty to act in the best long-term interests of the organization. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by making assumptions without validation is professionally unacceptable. Assumptions, while sometimes necessary, must be clearly identified, justified, and tested where possible. Making unsubstantiated assumptions can introduce significant bias into the risk assessment, rendering its conclusions unreliable. This undermines the purpose of the assessment and can lead to poor strategic decisions, representing an ethical lapse in professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to risk assessment. This begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the assessment. Next, a comprehensive risk identification phase should be undertaken, utilizing a variety of methods such as brainstorming, expert interviews, and data analysis. Following identification, risks should be analyzed to understand their likelihood and impact. Evaluation then involves prioritizing risks based on their significance. Finally, appropriate responses, including mitigation, transfer, acceptance, or avoidance, should be developed and implemented. Throughout this process, documentation and communication are crucial to ensure transparency and accountability. Professionals must maintain objectivity, challenge assumptions, and seek diverse perspectives to ensure the integrity and effectiveness of the risk assessment. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, upward trend in transaction processing times over the past quarter, exceeding the internal benchmark by 0.5% on average, but remaining within the absolute maximum allowed by the relevant financial services regulations. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and compliant response to this observation? Option A. Initiate a detailed review of the transaction processing system's architecture and performance logs to identify the root cause of the gradual increase, cross-referencing findings with internal policy thresholds and regulatory guidance on operational resilience. Option B. Disregard the trend as it is minor and well within the absolute regulatory limits, assuming it is a normal operational fluctuation that does not warrant further attention. Option C. Implement immediate system optimizations to reduce transaction processing times, aiming to bring them back below the internal benchmark without conducting a root cause analysis. Option D. Immediately report the observed trend to senior management and the compliance department, flagging it as a potential breach of regulatory operational standards due to the consistent deviation from the benchmark. Correct answer is A. Initiate a detailed review of the transaction processing system's architecture and performance logs to identify the root cause of the gradual increase, cross-referencing findings with internal policy thresholds and regulatory guidance on operational resilience. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret complex data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential compliance issues without direct, explicit evidence of a breach. The challenge lies in distinguishing between normal operational fluctuations and indicators of a potential regulatory violation, demanding a nuanced understanding of the relevant regulatory framework and the business's operational context. The pressure to act decisively while avoiding unnecessary alarm or overreaction adds to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based review of the monitoring data against established internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. This means not just observing a deviation, but understanding its context, potential causes, and whether it crosses a threshold defined by regulations or internal controls. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes accuracy, due diligence, and a structured investigation. It aligns with regulatory expectations for proactive compliance monitoring and risk management, ensuring that any actions taken are proportionate and justified by concrete findings. This methodical process minimizes the risk of both false positives and false negatives, safeguarding the firm's reputation and regulatory standing. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the issue to senior management or regulatory bodies based solely on the observed deviation without further investigation. This fails to demonstrate due diligence and can lead to unnecessary panic, reputational damage, and wasted resources. It bypasses the professional responsibility to gather sufficient information and assess the situation critically, potentially violating principles of proportionality and responsible reporting. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the deviation as insignificant without understanding its potential implications or comparing it against historical data and established thresholds. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to appreciate the potential for even small deviations to indicate systemic issues or emerging risks. It could lead to a breach of regulatory requirements if the deviation, in fact, signals non-compliance, exposing the firm to penalties and sanctions. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the observed deviation by making ad hoc adjustments to operational parameters without understanding the root cause or regulatory implications. This could inadvertently create new compliance issues or mask existing ones, demonstrating a superficial understanding of both the operational system and the regulatory environment. It prioritizes a quick fix over a sustainable compliance solution. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory framework governing their operations. This involves identifying key compliance indicators and thresholds. Next, they should analyze the monitoring data within its operational context, considering historical trends and expected variations. If a deviation is observed, the professional reasoning process should involve 1. Quantifying the deviation and comparing it against defined thresholds. 2. Identifying potential causes through further data analysis or consultation with relevant teams. 3. Assessing the regulatory and business impact of the deviation. 4. Documenting all findings and the decision-making process. 5. Escalating or taking corrective action only when sufficient evidence supports a potential compliance issue, always prioritizing accuracy and proportionality. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates an intermittent, low-level fluctuation in a sensor reading related to the vehicle's braking system. This fluctuation is outside the normal operating parameters, but has not triggered any warning lights or drive-reported issues. What is the most appropriate next step? Option A. Implement a software patch to adjust the sensor's threshold and prevent future alerts, assuming it's a minor calibration issue. Option B. Ignore the anomaly as it has not resulted in any driver complaints or warning lights and focus resources on more pressing issues. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive diagnostic investigation, cross-referencing the sensor data with other vehicle system logs and environmental conditions to determine the root cause before any conclusions are drawn. Option D. Immediately flag the vehicle for a potential recall and alert the relevant regulatory bodies due to the anomaly in a critical safety system. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive diagnostic investigation, cross-referencing the sensor data with other vehicle system logs and environmental conditions to determine the root cause before any conclusions are drawn. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for misinterpreting data and the critical need for accurate reporting within the automotive industry, particularly concerning safety and compliance. The pressure to quickly identify and address issues, coupled with the complexity of interconnected vehicle systems, requires a systematic and evidence-based approach. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes thorough investigation and verification before drawing conclusions or initiating corrective actions. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible product development, ensuring that any identified issues are genuine and that remediation efforts are targeted and effective, adhering to internal quality control protocols and regulatory reporting guidelines, e.g., those overseen by bodies like the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA in the U.S., if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, is paramount. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of unnecessary recalls, customer dissatisfaction, and potential regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that immediately assumes a critical failure based on a single anomaly fails to account for potential sensor malfunctions, transient system glitches, or external environmental factors. This could lead to premature and costly investigations, unnecessary alarm among stakeholders, and potentially a premature recall or service campaign that is not warranted, violating principles of efficient resource allocation and responsible product management. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established diagnostic procedures and directly implementing a software fix without understanding the root cause is ethically and professionally unsound. This could mask a deeper underlying issue, potentially leading to more severe problems down the line, and violates the obligation to ensure product safety and reliability. It also circumvents the established quality assurance and validation processes, which are designed to prevent such oversights. Further incorrect approach that involves downplaying or ignoring the anomaly due to time constraints or perceived minor impact is a direct contravention of safety and compliance obligations. Even seemingly minor anomalies can be indicators of developing systemic issues. Failing to investigate thoroughly risks noncompliance with reporting requirements and could have serious safety implications for consumers, representing a significant ethical and regulatory failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the anomaly and its potential significance. 2. Initiating a structured diagnostic process following established protocols. 3. Corroborating findings with multiple data points and diagnostic tools. 4. Consulting with relevant engineering teams and subject matter experts. 5. Evaluating the findings against known failure modes and regulatory requirements. 6. Documenting all steps and findings meticulously. 7. Escalating and reporting as per internal procedures and regulatory mandates only after a confirmed issue is identified and understood. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring, subtle deviation in candidate assessment scoring patterns that deviates from established benchmarks, but the exact cause is not immediately apparent. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance with the Toyota Hiring Assessment Test's regulatory framework? Option A. Immediately escalate for a comprehensive, company-wide audit of all hiring assessment processes to identify any potential systemic issues. Option B. Classify the deviation as a minor statistical fluctuation and continue with standard monitoring without further investigation. Option C. Implement mandatory retraining for all hiring managers on assessment procedures based on the initial flagged pattern. Option D. Initiate a targeted review of the specific assessment modules and data points contributing to the flagged pattern, gathering additional context before considering broader actions. The correct answer is D. Initiate a targeted review of the specific assessment modules and data points contributing to the flagged pattern, gathering additional context before considering broader actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the potential for overregulation and the impact on operational efficiency. The monitoring system has flagged a pattern that could indicate a compliance issue, but the nature of the pattern is not immediately definitive. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of response without causing undue disruption or missing a genuine risk. This requires careful judgment to distinguish between minor deviations and significant compliance breaches. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multi-stage investigation that begins with a deeper dive into the flagged pattern. This is best professional practice because it adheres to a principle of proportionality and due diligence. It allows for the collection of more data and context before escalating to more resource-intensive actions. This approach aligns with regulatory expectations for a robust compliance program that is both effective and efficient. It demonstrates a commitment to understanding the root cause of the anomaly, which is crucial for preventing future issues and ensuring ongoing adherence to the Toyota hiring assessment test-specific regulatory framework. This methodical process ensures that resources are allocated appropriately and that any subsequent actions are well-founded and justifiable. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately escalating the flagged pattern for a full-scale audit without further preliminary investigation. This represents a failure in due diligence and proportionality. It can lead to wasted resources, unnecessary disruption to operations, and potentially damage team morale if the flagged pattern turns out to be a false positive or a minor, easily rectifiable issue. Ethically, it can be seen as an overreaction that lacks a balanced assessment of risk. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the flagged pattern as a minor anomaly without any further review. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to the principles of compliance and risk management. By ignoring a potential red flag, the organization risks overlooking a genuine breach of the Toyota hiring assessment test-specific regulatory framework, which could lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and harm to individuals. This approach signifies a passive or negligent stance towards compliance responsibilities. A third incorrect approach is to implement immediate, broad procedural changes across all teams based solely on the initial flag pattern. This is an inefficient and potentially disruptive response. It fails to identify the specific source or cause of the anomaly, leading to unnecessary changes that may not address the actual problem and could create new operational challenges. This approach lacks the analytical rigor required for effective compliance management and demonstrates a failure to apply a reasoned, evidence-based decision-making process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific requirements of the Toyota hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. The decision-making process should involve 1. Initial assessment. Understand the nature of the flagged pattern and its potential implications within the regulatory context. 2. Data gathering and analysis. Collect additional relevant data to contextualize the anomaly. This might involve reviewing related documentation, interviewing relevant personnel, or examining system logs. 3. Risk evaluation. Based on the gathered information, assess the potential severity of the compliance risk. 4. Proportional response. Determine the most appropriate and proportionate course of action, ranging from further monitoring to targeted investigation or broader remediation. 5. Documentation. Maintain clear records of the assessment, findings, and actions taken. Question 16. The performance metrics show a significant increase in candidate engagement with the online assessment platform, but also a slight uptick in data access requests from candidates regarding their personal information. The hiring team is considering implementing a new feature to personalize candidate communication based on their assessment performance, which would involve analyzing their responses in more detail. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Inform candidates that their data will be used for personalization and proceed with the feature without a formal review of the privacy policy or regulations to avoid delays. Option B. Proceed with implementing the personalization feature immediately to enhance candidate experience, assuming that analyzing assessment performance data is standard practice and implicitly consented to. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the candidate privacy policy and relevant data protection regulations to determine if the proposed personalization feature is permissible and if explicit consent is required for the new data analysis. Option D. Focus solely on meeting the performance metrics and address any potential data privacy concerns only if a formal complaint is received from a candidate. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the candidate privacy policy and relevant data protection regulations to determine if the proposed personalization feature is permissible and if explicit consent is required for the new data analysis. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of business objectives with strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and customer information handling. The pressure to meet performance metrics can create a temptation to cut corners or interpret regulations loosely, which can lead to significant legal and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are not only effective in achieving business goals, but also fully compliant with the Toyota hiring assessment test's specified regulatory framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework. This involves proactive measures to ensure data handling processes are compliant, seeking clarification when in doubt, and documenting all compliance-related decisions. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect candidate data and uphold the integrity of the hiring process, as mandated by the principles underlying the Toyota hiring assessment test's regulatory guidelines. An incorrect approach that involves using candidate data for purposes not explicitly consented to or outlined in the privacy policy represents a direct violation of data protection regulations. This failure erodes customer trust and can result in severe penalties. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming compliance without verification or relying on outdated information, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the dynamic nature of regulatory requirements. This can lead to unintentional noncompliance and expose the organization to risk. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore potential compliance issues in favor of meeting immediate performance targets, is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible. It prioritizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability and legal standing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the relevant regulatory obligations. This should be followed by assessing current practices against these obligations, identifying any gaps or potential risks. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, seeking guidance from compliance officers or legal counsel is crucial. Documenting all compliance-related decisions and actions provides a clear audit trail and demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence. Question 17. System analysis indicates that a proposed process optimization for a key customer service workflow, aimed at reducing average handling time by 15%, has been developed by an external vendor. While the vendor claims significant efficiency gains, internal review has identified potential risks related to data privacy during the transition and the possibility of increased customer frustration if the new system is not intuitive. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing this optimization? Option A. Reject the proposed optimization outright due to the identified risks and continue with the existing process to avoid any potential disruption or compliance issues. Option B. Proceed with the optimization by making minor adjustments to the existing process based on the vendor's recommendations, without a full system overhaul or pilot testing. Option C. Implement the new process across all customer service channels immediately to realize the claimed efficiency benefits, relying on the vendor's expertise to manage any unforeseen issues. Option D. Conduct a limited pilot program of the new process in a single customer service channel, with comprehensive monitoring of key performance indicators, customer feedback, and data privacy compliance, followed by a phased rollout if successful. The correct answer is C. Implement the new process across all customer service channels immediately to realize the claimed efficiency benefits, relying on the vendor's expertise to manage any unforeseen issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization where a proposed solution, while seemingly efficient on the surface, carries significant risks of unintended consequences. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for immediate efficiency gains with the imperative to maintain long-term operational integrity, compliance, and customer satisfaction. A hasty implementation without thorough risk assessment could lead to regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and ultimately, a less effective or even detrimental process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation with robust monitoring and feedback mechanisms. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing a controlled and iterative improvement cycle. It allows for early detection of deviations from expected outcomes, minimizes the impact of any unforeseen issues, and provides data to refine the optimization. This methodical approach is ethically sound as it safeguards against potential harm to stakeholders and is implicitly supported by general principles of responsible business conduct and operational risk management, which are foundational to maintaining trust and compliance in any regulated industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediate, full-scale deployment of the new process without pilot testing. This represents a significant ethical failure by disregarding the potential for negative impacts on customers and employees. It also creates a high risk of regulatory noncompliance if the new process inadvertently violates established standards or reporting requirements. From a professional standpoint, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established risk management protocols. Another incorrect approach is to abandon the optimization entirely due to the initial concerns without further investigation or alternative solutions. This is professionally suboptimal, as it misses an opportunity for genuine improvement and can lead to stagnation. Ethically, it might be seen as a failure to act in the best interest of the organization's efficiency and competitiveness, provided that a safe and compliant optimization is indeed possible. It also fails to demonstrate the problem-solving initiative expected of professionals. A third incorrect approach is to implement the optimization solely based on the vendor's assurances without independent verification or internal validation. This is a critical ethical and professional lapse. It demonstrates a failure to exercise independent judgment and due diligence, potentially exposing the organization to risks that were not adequately assessed. It also undermines internal control mechanisms and could lead to the adoption of a process that is not fit for purpose or compliant with relevant regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization with a framework that emphasizes thorough analysis, risk assessment, iterative testing, and continuous monitoring. This involves 1. Clearly defining the objectives and scope of the optimization. 2. Identifying potential risks and their impact, including regulatory and ethical considerations. 3. Developing a phased implementation plan, including pilot testing and data collection. 4. Establishing clear metrics for success and failure. 5. Implementing robust feedback loops for continuous improvement and issue resolution. 6. Ensuring all proposed changes are validated against current regulatory requirements and ethical standards. 7. Maintaining open communication with all stakeholders throughout the process. Question 18. The audit findings indicate a potential deviation from standard quality control procedures in a specific manufacturing batch, which could impact the long-term reliability of a component. The production manager is pushing to release the batch to meet quarterly targets, citing minimal observed impact so far. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with releasing the batch as scheduled, with a note to the quality control team to monitor the affected vehicles more closely in the field. Option B. Immediately escalate the issue to senior management without conducting an initial assessment, requesting their directive on how to proceed. Option C. Initiate an immediate, thorough investigation involving quality control and engineering teams to determine the root cause and potential impact of the deviation, and withhold release of the batch until a definitive resolution is found. Option D. Inform the production manager that the batch will be released as planned to meet targets, and suggest they address any potential issues in future production runs. The correct answer is C. Initiate an immediate, thorough investigation involving quality control and engineering teams to determine the root cause and potential impact of the deviation, and withhold release of the batch until a definitive resolution is found. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term ethical and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential quality issues, which could have significant consequences for Toyota's reputation and customer safety. A robust decision-making framework is essential to navigate such conflicts. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven investigation before making a decision. This aligns with Toyota's commitment to quality and safety, as well as general ethical principles of due diligence and responsible corporate behavior. Specifically, it involves gathering all relevant facts, consulting with appropriate experts, engineering, quality control, and assessing the potential risks and impacts. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and minimize potential harm, thereby upholding regulatory expectations for product integrity and consumer protection. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting production targets without adequate investigation fails to uphold the principle of responsible product stewardship. This could lead to the release of vehicles with undetected defects, violating consumer protection laws, and potentially leading to recalls, lawsuits, and severe reputational damage. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for the potential safety implications and a failure to exercise due care. Another incorrect approach that involves making a decision based on incomplete information or personal intuition, rather than objective data and expert consultation, is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses critical quality assurance steps and risks making a decision that is not grounded in reality, potentially leading to the same negative outcomes as prioritizing production over quality. It represents a failure to follow established procedures and a lack of professional skepticism. A further incorrect approach that involves deferring the decision entirely to a superior without providing a comprehensive analysis of the situation and recommended course of action abdicates responsibility. While escalation is sometimes necessary, it should be accompanied by a clear presentation of the facts and potential solutions, allowing the superior to make an informed decision. Simply passing the problem up the chain without due diligence is a failure of professional accountability. Professionals should use a structured decision-making framework that includes 1. Problem identification. Clearly define the issue and its potential implications. 2. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data, facts, and expert opinions. 3. Alternative evaluation. Identify and assess different courses of action considering their pros, cons, and potential risks. 4. Decision-making. Select the best course of action based on the evaluation, prioritizing safety, quality, and compliance. 5. Implementation and monitoring. Execute the decision and track its effectiveness, making adjustments as needed. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential inconsistency in how client onboarding documentation is being processed, which could raise concerns about adherence to anti-money laundering AML regulations. As a compliance officer, what is the most appropriate initial step to take? Option A. Forward the feedback to the junior compliance analyst responsible for onboarding procedures and ask them to investigate and report back. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the client onboarding process, cross-referencing all documentation against current AML legislation and internal policies, and document all findings and any necessary corrective actions. Option C. Dismiss the feedback as likely being a misunderstanding, as the current onboarding process has been in place for several years without prior issues. Option D. Immediately halt all new client onboarding until a full investigation can be completed to prevent any further potential breaches. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the client onboarding process, cross-referencing all documentation against current AML legislation and internal policies, and document all findings and any necessary corrective actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance where a company receives feedback suggesting a potential gap in its adherence to established procedures. The professional challenge lies in interpreting this feedback, determining the appropriate course of action, and ensuring that any response is both effective in addressing the perceived issue and compliant with the relevant regulatory framework. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the desire to respond to stakeholder concerns with the imperative to act within legal and ethical boundaries, avoiding overreaction or underestimation of the issue. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigation and remediation. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating a commitment to continuous improvement and robust compliance. Specifically, it involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the feedback. This is crucial for audit trails and demonstrates a proactive stance. 2. Conducting a thorough internal review. This allows for an objective assessment of the feedback against existing policies and procedures. 3. Consulting relevant internal experts and potentially external legal counsel if the issue is complex or has significant implications. 4. Implementing necessary corrective actions based on the findings of the review. 5. Communicating the findings and actions taken to the relevant stakeholders. This approach ensures that any identified noncompliance is addressed effectively, minimizing risk to the organization and upholding its regulatory obligations. It reflects a commitment to the principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected within the financial services industry, as often emphasized by regulatory bodies like the FCA in the UK. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the feedback or dismissing it without investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It suggests a disregard for stakeholder concerns and a potential blind spot regarding compliance. This could lead to ongoing breaches of regulations, reputational damage, and potential enforcement actions by regulatory authorities. Implementing immediate, sweeping changes without a proper investigation is also problematic. While seemingly proactive, it can be inefficient, costly, and may not address the root cause of the issue. It can also create new compliance risks if changes are not carefully considered and implemented. This approach lacks the due diligence required by regulatory frameworks that expect reasoned and evidence-based decision-making. Delegating the entire responsibility to a junior team member without adequate oversight or clear guidance is another failure. While delegation is a management tool, critical compliance matters require senior attention and accountability. This can lead to incomplete investigations, misinterpretation of regulations, and ultimately, a failure to adequately address the compliance issue, exposing the firm to regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such feedback should adopt a structured decision-making process. 1. Understand the feedback. Clearly identify the nature and source of the stakeholder concern. 2. Assess the potential impact. Evaluate the regulatory, financial, and reputational risks associated with the feedback. 3. Consult the regulatory framework. Determine which specific rules, laws, or guidelines are potentially relevant. For a UK-based financial services firm, this would involve referencing FCA handbook, relevant legislation like the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000, and potentially industry best practices. 4. Formulate an investigation plan. Outline the steps to gather information and assess the situation objectively. 5. Execute the plan with due diligence. Ensure thoroughness and accuracy in the investigation. 6. Determine appropriate action. Based on findings, decide on corrective measures which may include policy updates, training, or process improvements. 7. Document all steps. Maintain a clear record of the feedback, investigation, and actions taken for audit and compliance purposes. 8. Communicate appropriately. Inform relevant parties about the resolution. Question 20. Market research demonstrates a potential for a new vehicle model to significantly outperform competitors in a specific segment. However, the initial data collection phase has yielded some mixed results, with certain customer feedback points being less favorable than anticipated. A senior manager is eager to present a highly optimistic outlook to stakeholders, suggesting that the team should focus only on the positive feedback and downplay any negative comments in the final report. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Present a balanced report that includes both positive and negative findings, clearly outlining the methodology and any limitations, and recommending further investigation into the less favorable feedback. Option B. Request additional, targeted research that specifically seeks to elicit positive responses, thereby reinforcing the desired optimistic outlook. Option C. Exaggerate the positive customer feedback and omit any negative comments to create a more compelling and optimistic narrative for stakeholders. Option D. Focus solely on the positive data points, assuming that the negative feedback is an anomaly and not representative of the broader market sentiment. Correct answer is A. Present a balanced report that includes both positive and negative findings, clearly outlining the methodology and any limitations, and recommending further investigation into the less favorable feedback. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to gain a competitive edge and the ethical obligation to conduct market research responsibly and transparently. The pressure to achieve positive results can tempt individuals to overlook or manipulate data, potentially leading to misleading conclusions and unfair market practices. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension and uphold professional integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data integrity and ethical conduct. By ensuring that the market research methodology is sound, the data collection is unbiased, and the analysis is objective, it upholds the principles of fairness and accuracy. This aligns with the general ethical guidelines for professional conduct, which emphasize honesty, integrity, and avoiding misrepresentation. While specific regulations for a Toyota hiring assessment test are not provided, the underlying ethical principles of professional conduct in business and research are universally applicable. This approach avoids any suggestion of manipulating findings or engaging in deceptive practices, which would be detrimental to both the company's reputation and the integrity of the market. An incorrect approach that involves selectively presenting data to highlight favorable trends, while ignoring contradictory evidence, represents a failure in professional integrity and potentially a breach of ethical conduct. This can lead to flawed business decisions based on incomplete or biased information. It also risks misrepresenting the market to stakeholders, including potential investors or consumers, which can have legal and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach, which is to inflate the perceived success of a product based on preliminary or anecdotal evidence without rigorous validation, is also ethically problematic. This can create unrealistic expectations and lead to disappointment, damaging customer trust. It also bypasses the necessary due diligence required in professional market analysis. A third incorrect approach, which is to use proprietary competitor data obtained through questionable means to inform market research, is a clear violation of ethical and potentially legal boundaries. This undermines fair competition and demonstrates a lack of integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of ethical principles and company policies. Professionals should always strive for objectivity, transparency, and accuracy in their work. When faced with pressure to produce favorable results, it is crucial to 1. Reaffirm commitment to ethical standards and data integrity. 2. Clearly communicate the limitations of the data and the methodology used. 3. Seek guidance from supervisors or ethics committees if there is any doubt about the appropriateness of an approach. 4. Prioritize long-term reputation and trust over short-term gains achieved through unethical means.